Welcome to Smalltalk Daily for Thursday, December 3rd, 2009. This morning I wanted to cover hooking up a domain model and a UI in kind of the preferred way in VisualWorks. And to go through this, let's start with a very simple domain. We have a counter object, which we'll go ahead and inspect. And you see that it has a count object in it, which is just a number. And I can do things like send add 1 to it, which, once I refresh this, will pop it up to 1. So that's really all there is to this. The idea here isn't to have a complex model, it's to have a model that's very simple to understand, and then build a UI on top of it and show you how to hook the UI up to it. So I built a little UI, and I can go ahead and open this. It's not going to work right. Counter UI open. Well, it's going to work, but it's not hooked up to the domain at this point. And you see that I have a current display of the value. I have this add 1 button that does nothing because nothing's been hooked up. There's no behavior to this. It's just a painted UI. What I want to do though is have the value here being displayed be an instance of this guy here, counter new. And then I want those two to update and sync as I do things. So a couple of things I need to do. One, I need to go and look at the definition of this class. It turns out that this guy doesn't know anything about the domain, so I'm going to add a variable called model. And I'm going to go ahead and right click on this and go to instance variables and say create accessors. I'm going to create accessors for the model, and then I'm going to create a new initialize release protocol, and I'm going to create an initialize method. And in this method, if I could spell it, we're going to do super initialize, and then we're going to do this. Model gets counter new as value. Okay, so now we've got a hold on our model object. What we need to do is hook up the field. So we have this count field, which currently is just a value holder on 0, which means we're wrapping the 0 around something that can be notified of changes. What we need to do is wrap something around not a 0 locally, but around the count variable in the counter domain. So we need to hook up something called an aspect adapter. So this is the code for the aspect adapter. It's on the aspect count in the model, and the subject sends updates. And what does that mean? That means down here in the domain, if I look at count colon, we see that it signals a change whenever it's updated. So it's telling anybody that's interested, I've changed, and the guy that's interested is up here because he's been hooked up to it. Now this is a cascade for these two methods off of this aspect adapter. I'll take a look at the aspect adapter in a moment, but for right now, let's go ahead and do this. We'll inspect the results. So we'll push the inspector aside for a minute, and we'll go ahead and add 1 to this. And you notice that it's not working yet. The reason for that is simple. We haven't actually done anything with the add 1 method. So let's go ahead and go to the add 1 method. And now what we want to do is do this, self model value. And we have to send value to this because the model is a wrapper around the counter, add 1. Now this should all work. So let's go ahead and open that up with an inspector, push that out of the way. And we'll go here and hit add 1. We notice it's updating. Let's go ahead and dive into this. So we want to go here to source. I've got actually something called a builder. So let's go to the model, which is the counter. And we'll go to the value, which is the actual object itself. And we see the counter value is 2. So let's go ahead and add 1. Add 1 again. Look at this. And you see they're in sync. And that's because we've hooked the two up through this channel of the aspect using something called an aspect adapter. Now let's go ahead and browse class aspect adapter. And the best way to understand this is to read this class comment. It actually explains what's going on pretty well. All it does is it adapts user interface messages when you update the value model with value and value colon, either to get the value or set the value, translates them down to the domain and sends the setter message or getter message to the underlying object. So it just does a translation so that whatever the domain model is doing to get and set values, up here in the UI, it'll be reflected through the aspect adapter into that field you're trying to update. And that's exactly what we've done here. So that's really what you need to do to hook up to a domain, is you set up something like an aspect adapter, and there are a variety of other models you can use. If you go in here, for instance, to the hierarchy, you'll find this is subclass.value model. If I switch back over here to get the hierarchy on that, whole bunch of these, of which aspect adapter is just one. Value holder is a very simple one. Buffered value holder is one that allows you to have a trigger on the changes so that you can have the UI not reflect changes until some event happens, like maybe you have form level updating instead of field level. You don't want anything to update until the whole thing has flashed all at once, so everything flows to the model at once. bunch of stuff that's outside the scope of this particular screencast, but this is the basics. This is what you're generally going to do to hook up a UI in a domain. Pick an aspect adapter or a value holder, hook up a field down to a domain model, and then allow them to update like that. So that's about it for today. Until next time, have fun with Smalltalk.